Hello everybody and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying the Adam's Irresistible with a little bit of a variant tail. The hook I'm using is a size 12 dry fly hook from Partridge. This is definitely a fly that's easier to tie in slightly larger sizes. And the first thread I'll be using for the deer hair work is 50 denier GSP. Up at the head end we'll switch over to UTC 70 in black. For the tails I'm going to be using some woodchuck guard hair, and then for the body this is some really nice spinning deer hair from Nature's Spirit in a natural greyish tan colour. For the wings I'm going to use some grizzly hackle tips, and then for actually hackling the fly, instead of the usual grizzly and brown combination, I'm going to be using some Cree. It's got the grizzly, it's got the brown, it's a lovely feather, almost like a one-step Adams. So let's get started. I've cast on my GSP about a third of the way down the hook shank, and that's to define the length of my body. Taking a pinch of the woodchuck, I'm going to tie that in. I've stripped out all of the underfur. This of course replaces the usual grizzly and brown hackle that we would normally use for the tail on an Adams. I do like tying with woodchuck. I managed to get hold of a whole skin recently, and I've been finding that it's an excellent tailing material for dry flies. Very stiff, nicely barred, and looks very natural. Bit of a pain to get hold of in the UK, but Steve from Cookshill came through. Running my thread back down the body now, securing down those tails and stopping just at the end where I want to start building up that chunky deer hair body. Making sure everything's nicely in line, and now I'm going to put a whip finish on, and this is to secure the thread and stop it from slipping around the bend of the hook. If you don't do this as you pack the deer hair, because this is a fairly slippery thread, it can try and make its way around the bend of the hook, and that will disrupt the tail. But by putting a whip finish in, it gives us a firm backstop and we won't slip any further. I've cleaned and prepared some pinches of my deer hair, and for this first one I'm going to make a couple of loose wraps over, draw tight, and then slowly working my thread forward, let the deer hair spin and flare, draw everything back and secure down on the hook shank. You'll notice that this is the most difficult pinch to do. When you're working with deer hair at the rear of a fly, it always wants to get caught in the hook on the bend. But we're just going to keep building forwards, adding in more pinches of deer hair as we go, until we've reached that tie-in point where we cast on our thread in the first place. We're done with the GSP now, and it's only going to get in the way as we trim the deer hair, so whip finish and trim away. Now it's a good idea to give all the deer hair a really good brushing, get it pointing out perpendicular from the hook shank, give us plenty of meat to carve into. And there's a few different ways you can carve this. I like using a razor blade. Some people prefer using scissors, but either way, what we're going to be aiming for is a nice chunky body. Adds lots of bulk and lots of buoyancy to the fly, and it makes it quite a really attractive pattern. Sometimes the skinny dry flies, whilst they might look more natural, just don't seem to attract the attention of fish quite as much. Although I do secretly wonder if it's because this looks a little bit like a trout pellet and the stockfish like it. Anyway, with the body made, we're going to cast on my black thread at the front. And I've prepared 2 hackle tips. I've tried to choose nice even ones with good barring, and you'll see that I've not stripped the barbs off, but I've cut them off, and I'm going to tie them in both together on top of the hook shank and work backwards. By cutting the barbs off, it creates a little bit of extra texture for the thread to grip onto, helps to keep those wings more secure, and it stops that little bit of hackle stem from getting too thin. With the wings secure, I'm just going to run my thread back down to the end of the body, and at this point I'm going to tie in my hackle. I do like using Cree. It's a difficult feather to get hold of, but when you're tying flies that call for that classic colour combination of grizzly and brown, it can be a really versatile feather, especially in smaller sized flies. Not so much of a problem here, but I'm just being a little bit lazy. That said, it is a bit trickier wrapping the 2 hackles up against that body, so in the interests of keeping it nice and clean, I've decided to go with the Cree. I've made a couple of wraps just to prop the wing up, but I'm not being too persnickety about it. As we wrap forward with the hackle, there'll be plenty of bushiness there in order to help that wing. Wrap the hackle forward, secure down, build up a small head, and here's a look at the finished fly. And see, it's a little bit different to a normal Adams, lots more bulk, but that deer hair is lovely and buoyant, and it creates a very impressive meniscus in the water. It's an interesting pattern to tie and not too hard once you get the hang of it, so give it a go. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.